My name's Dr. Caroline Parker. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at the Forensic Genomics Innovation Hub in Southampton. The Forensic Genomics Innovation Hub was founded in 2020 with the aim of bringing forensic genomics into the criminal justice system in the United Kingdom. The spectrum in the Forensic Genomics Innovation Hub is very much used for development at the moment. We're using it to develop some new assays in cell-free DNA. It's got a more clinical focus for us at the moment. We are, however, also working with some university groups, with forensic science departments and degree courses and postgrads, where we're helping a bit with forensic archaeology. And the spectrum is quite good, is novel for them because they don't have access to this new instrument. So we're taking the spectrum not only into the clinical sphere, but also into projects for universities and students. We invested in a Spectrum 8-cap instrument in December 2023. It was the first one in the UK. It was very exciting. It was innovation, which is what we stand for. One was the development of the new 8-dye chemistries, which we feel really does have a good position within the forensic market in general, but also because of working with Promega. They've got a phenomenal reputation for service and support. My initial impression of our spectrum is very much about how its ease of use and how hardy it is. That would be probably my best description, because we are a busy little lab and we are jumping around doing things. I'm still on, I'm proud to say, my first capillary since December 2023, and it is running beautifully. We are past 600 injections, so there really is a workhorse element coming out in such a new instrument already. The spectrum does allow us to run a lot of other chemistries with relative ease. We've been able to buy some fragment analysis chemistries from other companies where we've been able to do some clinical assays, and the ability to just jump between those runs smoothly is something that is very new. The Spectrum CE has a couple of features that I'm particularly fond of, in respect to the fact that whilst we have the continuous loading capability for very high throughput laboratories, for us it works in a slightly different way. Continuous loading is actually excellent when you need to pivot, when you need to prioritize a plate, something comes in and you suddenly need to change your application. The ability to prioritize and change the priority of its running is something that's been very useful to us. It just gives that little bit of more flexibility. One of the things I like about the Spectrum in particular is its tolerance. The camera is able to manage a lot, you know, when you often overload a DNA profile, for example. In the past, they've been uninterpretable, but I've noticed, particularly with this instrument, that the camera is far more tolerant, so we can have exceptionally high RFUs and we will still be able to interpret a profile, which is slightly different to what we've known in the past. I think my favorite feature about the Spectrum would be the Spectrum control software in its entirety. The screen layout is much more open and much more easier to navigate. We've got a lot of control over it. We're able to check the instrument's performance, monitor the electrophoresis as it's happening without it affecting the run. The ability to edit protocols, to add new protocols. What is really nice is we can add other chemistries with ease. It's clear, it's obvious, and when we look at it, we can see that we've got a good record of our plates. The important thing for me is I can train someone very quickly to get going with it. And the software also is very stable. It integrates beautifully into the gene marker, to a point that you even actually load your your analysis parameters into spectrum control software for the run that it's actually going to analyze in gene marker. And then the beauty of it, even more for me when I run my paternities and when I do relationship testing, is the fact that we can use the relationship testing tool. That is completely new. And for us, that has been huge. This one is great from a perspective of integrating databases. It's seamless in the way that we can actually go from our raw data through to a final report. And that is absolutely excellent for a small laboratory where we're running different tests. It easily saves me a lot of time with the reporting of a paternity or a kinship from start to finish. The PowerPlex 35GY kit was obviously very new to us. It's one of the reasons we wanted the instrument. Introduction of the 8-die chemistry in particular into the laboratory has been quite revolutionary, because in the past we've always had to run maybe a handful of kits to get where we need to go. In this instance, this is a single PCR, and in a single PCR I am able to generate profiles where I'm getting Y information. It's also able to go down to the forensic level. We validated it down to tiny amounts of input DNA. Also getting your quality control markers. That is something to be very cognizant of, I appreciate, specifically in forensics, because all too often we think that our sample is degraded and it's terrible and it's not going to work, but it could be inhibition. And the 35GY kit with its QIS and its QIL, so it's little marker and its large marker, quality marker, just basically gives you that answer. Is your DNA actually degraded, or is it a PCR issue? So it's excellent for troubleshooting forensic samples in that respect. We've also had the opportunity to test the PowerPlex 18E kit, which has a slightly different application. So for degraded samples, it really is a bit of a game changer, because you're getting so many more. Instead of those sort of partial profiles, you're almost getting full profiles in samples where initially you wouldn't have necessarily been able to, because you've got a lot more markers across 8 dyes that are all less than 300 base pairs. But for a clinical application where we're dealing with cell-free DNA, for example, we are able to get a lot better picture of our cell-free DNA, because most of cell-free DNA is less than 170 base pairs. So it's a game changer for us. We're very excited to have recently received our PowerPlex 27GY. I think one of the first versions of the kit to be tested. I think the thing that's most exciting about 27GY is obviously this new enzyme. We've been monitoring this release of this new enzyme, and I'm really looking forward to the application of really testing this reduced stutter. It's clearly got a forensic application, there's no doubt about it, especially when you're unpacking complicated mixtures that have, I think, the bane of almost every forensic lab and every specialized casework sample. Stutter is without doubt the hardest part to unpack. We're now just about to start looking at PowerPlex 27GY for a very exciting clinical application. And that is something, whilst I can't talk about it at the moment, is something where the reduced stutter enzyme could be a real game changer for us and take innovation to the next level. And again, the reduced stutter for us is going to help remove artifacts that we could be miscalling at the moment. We had a lot of experience in next generation sequencing in the forensic sphere, and the Spectrum was really going to help us bridge the gap between the standard STRs and the NGS. We can say from personal experience, we've compared some of the compromised samples that we've run on our NGS platform. We compared on the Spectrum with the 35GY and PowerPlex 18E. There is finally now something that can, like I said before, can bridge the gap between the standard STRs and the NGS. Not just from a science perspective, but from a day-to-day running perspective. You can use the technology that's accredited, that we know, that is a gold standard in forensic analysis, but it's cheaper. It doesn't have to be run on large batches. It runs in a matter of 40 minutes as opposed to 4 days. So there is some real advantages from a workflow perspective in a laboratory. There's an efficiency that needs to be considered. So you're going to get a lot more information, but using the science that you know. But I would seriously encourage any laboratory that really, forensic lab in particular, that wants to try and offer that little bit more. Not everyone can afford an NGS platform. And if you want to offer your forces that little bit extra, those improved profiles, the 8-die chemistry, still using STRs, then the Spectrum really does bring that additional value to your service offering. Working with Promega is something that is very important to me because as a company ourselves, we're all about customer focus. We're all about customer service as well as quality. And I can safely say Promega, myself, I feel is exactly the same. There might be scientists, but they've got the customer at the center of it. And for us, that's excellent. The Promega team, Promega UK team, have been particularly helpful to us as a startup. And we had a small team of people. And so I have actually been able to a couple of times phone up and say, help, we have a slight issue or we need someone to just assist someone with training, basic training. And there was always someone on hand. Promega do send somebody to come and help without having to issue me a quotation first. So we have new projects in the pipeline for the Spectrum to a point where we are actually now moving facilities. The laboratory is going to be moving into a slightly larger footprint, so the Spectrum will have a new home very soon. And some of those projects, whilst I can't tell you at the moment, are very exciting, they're very innovative, but we will be using the 8-die chemistries in a clinical application, as well as working with forensic partners to really help them test out how they can use the 8 dyes and get experience with the amount of information that can come out of the 8-die chemistry in their forensic casework.